All right, guys, here we go. Welcome to the first episode of the HPR Chronicles.
Yes, sir.
With Shakur and Smith, and HPR stands for History, Politics, and Race, right?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. This is our first episode, and the reason why, first of all, let me say this. The reason why we decided to do this is because Chris and myself, we always get into deep political and historical debates
Yep.
with he and our friends here in wine country. And it was actually Chris's idea. We were having a big debate one day at one of the speakeasies, and Chris goes, "This needs to be a podcast." You know what I'm saying? And because I already do a podcast, some of you may know me from Romantic Propaganda with Devon, the author. So I said, you know what, Crispy? Joe Button, a lot of other entertainers I know, they have two podcasts. Okay. So why can't I have a podcast? Two podcasts, I mean. So I asked Crispy to join in, Chris Smith, a.k.a. Crispy, to join in. And he said, yeah, I guess he's always been passionate about the same subjects, you know what I mean, when we're out and about. So anyway, with that said, we're jumping it off. This is the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith. And it's a podcast about history, politics, and race from a pop culture's perspective. We're going to be raw, we're going to curse, we're going to have fun, and these are important subject matters and topics, and the information is going to be correct and concise, but it's going to be in a fun way.
Yes, and it's important for everyone to know and to...
Absolutely.
This is, important information that we will be sharing. So
yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
So some of you already know, but I'm a movie director. Hold on. It's too much? It's too loud, Kia? Oh, my bad. So let me back up then a little bit. Okay. Sorry about that. Our camera guy said I was too loud. This is better?
Yeah, I even agree. That's why I was like,
Oh, okay, cool. Is it better? Okay, cool. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, so I'm film director Imani Shakur. A lot of you guys know me already and stuff like that. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I travel a lot, and I've always had a love for history and politics. And Chris can introduce himself and tell you guys a little bit about him.
In the Army Reserves, and then while there, started working at the VA hospital, and I've been there for 20-some years. So I'm a government employee, so I have that understanding, and all of this information that we will be sharing or topics we're hitting, I think involves me or affects me. So
there you have it. And Chris has a passion and love for history and politics as well, like I said. So our first episode, guys, is going to be the Electoral College and how Donald Trump won the presidency based on an old system that was created out of slavery. That's what the first topic is going to be. And Chris, I kind of think it's actually fitting because of, it's election season.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Everyone's trying to get Trump out of office. Yeah. This, that, and the other. We have all these Democrats that's running and stuff now. So I think this is a good time to kind of explain to you guys what the Electoral College is, how it was created, when, how it affects us today, how Trump won, and how it's going to affect us in the future. You know what I mean? So let me jump it off. And what I'll do is just say my piece, Chris, and you can interject when you want. But I'm going to explain what I'm going to explain.
Okay.
Then I'm going to shoot it to you and see if you want to add anything or anything like that. These are both topics that we kind of both looked up. So first of all, let's talk about what the Electoral College is. And what it is it's a group of electors that represent each state that's allowed to vote for the president. You know what I mean? That's all it is. It was created by James Madison back in 1787. And what happened was he didn't want the southern states to have influence on elections based on their amount of slaves. You know what I'm saying? All right, guys, follow me closely here. You know what I mean? Congress allocated representatives based on the whole number of free people and 3 out of 5 slaves instead of all slaves.
Wait, I kind of want to change one part of what you're saying. So if the stuff I'm reading or read, and it said that it was established to counteract the North, who had the highest population, from being able to just almost automatically elect the president.
You mean the South?
No, the North. The North had a higher population than the South. Okay, initially, and I'm not talking about slaves. Just
okay.
So
you
gotta get the history.
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. Yeah. No, exactly.
Because that kind of leads to the part you're about to bring up. I think you know what I'm saying. Like, if you start at the base of what it is, and they realize who would have the power.
Yeah. And that's one thing I like about Crispy. He always has a different side. And so which is going to make for a great podcast. And you guys will get why he said what he just said, and I'm going to explain it further, and we're both going to talk about it further. But it's deep. Mm-hmm. So anyway, back to what I just said. Congress allocated representatives based on the whole number of free people, but in the South, they allowed them a count of 3 for every 5 slaves. Okay. And I'm going to get into this deep. I want you guys to really understand what happened here. Slaves couldn't vote. Yep. So if they didn't count, slaves didn't vote. So if they didn't count the slaves, those slave states would be at a disadvantage.
They would have less power to vote because there was less people.
Because it was less people. Right. So keep in mind, before when James Madison first said this, and Chris, speak up too.
Yeah.
Don't speak so long. Speak up.
Oh, okay.
So keep in mind, when James Madison first said this, guys, he said it should be based on the popular vote. That's what he said, not no Electoral College. But then when they thought about the slaves was when they said, whoa. But in the South, if you add their slaves and they let their slaves vote, they have a lot, they outnumber us. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and I actually had the number, and I actually should have written it down. So they said, okay, we're gonna do it based on population, but you can't count all your slaves. You know what I'm saying? Your slaves, you get 3 out of 5, and I'm gonna explain further. Okay. All right. The North didn't want the slaves to count because they would lose based on a popular vote system, right? Mm-hmm. So if it just went the way it should be today without the Electoral College back then doing slavery,
okay.
If they counted all of the slaves and all that, and they did it on a popular vote, the South would always win because they would be outnumbered. They would outnumber the North just by the popular vote if they allowed all the slaves to count. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of tricky. You know what I mean? So okay, so let me keep going.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me keep going. So to be clear, for every 5 slaves, you get 3 counted. So if it was 5 slaves standing up there, they said, okay, that's 3. Yeah. Another 5, that's 3. It was actually called the 3 to 5 compromise. You know what I'm saying? They actually had a term for the whole thing. And before I go into the next section, I'm gonna let Crispy chime in.
So our history, our versions are a little different in saying that yes, the James Madison established it, and his thing was because if you count slaves for 3/5, 3/5 of how was it? Slaves were black people were 3/5 basically. You weren't a full person because, like you just said, every 3 to 5 was
right.
counted
For every 5, they would count 3.
So a slave master has all these people, or really it was just the population that they wanted to boost so that they can have the power for the electoral votes or electoral number. By having a higher the population, the more electoral representatives they get.
Right. They would actually allot.
Correct.
For that for that state.
And because the population up north was higher, their numbers were already
higher without counting
any slaves. So it's not that the slaves voted; it was just for population to create their number, so their number was higher.
Right, and I didn't say the slaves voted, by the way.
Yeah, you kind of did.
No, I didn't. No. What I said was, in the South, the slaves couldn't vote, but the slave master still wanted their slaves to count. So the North said they can count, but not all of them. I'm gonna.
I got you.
Yeah,
we're saying okay.
Yeah, because I knew they couldn't vote. No, I didn't say that at all.
Right.
So okay, so if you flip today, right? There's 538 electors exist, and an elector is a person that is allowed to vote on behalf of the population of a particular state.
So in other words, what you're saying is if California has 55.
Exactly.
So we have 55 electoral votes that we have out of the 538.
Right.
And
if we win, yeah. So whatever side
whoever
wins that vote in California would get that 55.
Correct.
Exactly.
No, I wasn't, just.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Okay. So the number equals the total voting membership. Okay, guys. So this number 538 that you guys hear about, you're watching the news every election, they go 270, 270, 270. Let me break that down. So where they get the 538 from, this number equals the total voting membership of the U.S. Congress. Let me break it down for you. There's 435 representatives. There's 3 electors just from D.C., and there's 100 senators, right? So the winner of the presidency gets over half of the 538, which is why you always hear the first one that gets to 270 wins. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the only, if you get to 270, that's it. The other person obviously has what? 268. And they don't win. You need 270 to win the presidency, just over half of the 538. You know what I'm saying?
So also with the whole electoral votes and how it's established in the numbers we have. So again, California, we have 55. The census is part of that aspect, which that's coming up. And there's a whole controversy over asking the citizen question on the census, which I think got overturned.
Yeah.
But why it's interesting is the more population that they can, a state has, that's their electoral. If their numbers go lower or higher, that can be changed around. Yeah. So you definitely want to always fill out the census. You don't want to hide, because it's supposed to take everybody.
Yeah. Can you explain that again, Chris? Because I'm glad you brought that up, because I saw that and I decided not to touch on the whole census part. So I'm glad you brought that up. Could you explain it again?
Yeah. So,
but just more clearly so that people could really hear it. You know what I'm saying? Explain the census again. Yeah, it's really important.
It's kind of hard to wrap around, but the census is where, of course, they come door to door. They're asking,
and they do it every 10 years. Yes. I just want to add that.
And they want to know how many people are living in a household, and they just want the number. They don't care who you are or where you're from. They just need the number. Why? Because the higher the population for that state, that determines the amount of electoral votes you get. So then, therefore, again, California, we have 55. Let's say Maine, they only have 4.
Right.
If our population in California went down and they took,
it might go to 50.
Numbers, or 52.
Just to give you guys an example, or even 52, right?
Yeah, and let's say Maine got a higher numbers, and theirs went up to 3.3. So they went from 4 to 7. Right. That gives those states more power because of numbers.
More electoral numbers, more electoral
and it's
votes,
all again kind of almost based on the thing we started off with, is that in the beginning, slave owners wanted to use their slaves as a number, to represent their states, but then they were only counted as 3/5. So right. So let's take a little further. Go ahead. To finish, is the reason why it's so important is when we vote locally, and we how am I trying to say this? As for the state, the more when you vote and you choose who you're voting for, Republican or Democrat or Independent, the more people who are voting, the number of votes mean that our representative of the Electoral College will throw their vote towards that person. So in other words, you don't vote, you're not telling the Electoral College who you want them to put in office. That's what I'm trying to get out.
Yeah, I mean,
again, it's so complicated.
Dude, it gets real tricky. I'm telling y'all, these motherfuckers are slick, and I'm gonna explain.
Go ahead.
I mean, it gets real tricky. So to further break it down, if the popular vote wins in that state, you get the electorate.
Yes.
The people that represent that state. But the person with the popular vote can also lose based on the Electoral College.
Yes.
Which is what happened with Trump and Hillary in 2016, and I'll explain. You know, because these states didn't equal the correct number of electoral votes. So even though Hillary, like for example, in 2016, Trump was able to get 306 electoral votes. Hillary only got 232, right? Now, if her state, even though she won more votes, because the state she won the 232 in had more people, which had ballots that voted for her, but she just didn't have the right number of electoral votes from those states.
No,
because the numbers just didn't add up to give her 270.
No, okay. So what it is she won. Like again, I'll just go with California.
Yeah.
So California voted so many more extra because of the population.
Right.
But because of electoral votes, when it doesn't match your population, which is why the census part is so important, that you end up losing your voice over time. So in other words, if the next census, if it switches and it can be brought up higher to 50 something, and someone loses a number because their numbers have gone down, then it sort of equals out. But because it's such a weird, hard subject to explain the whole, he won key states that gave him more numbers.
Right.
So in one respect, it's understandable that everyone should be represented, and regardless of where you're from, but it just should be equal, and that's the hard part. That So in other words, you can, like you said, you can win the popular state because more people voted overall, but they didn't all vote everywhere. They only voted here, and those numbers
exactly won. Right. Yeah. That's basically what I said. Like she won. She had more votes if you count them.
Yes.
But the states she won over just didn't add up to 270.
Correct.
And he won less votes if you count them. Yep. But the states he all won added up to 302, and that's how he became the president. You know what I'm saying? And again, a person can win just enough states with just enough, the correct amount of electoral votes to win, which is what happened with Trump. But he went way over 270. They underestimated Trump. And the loser can win states with more people but less electoral votes, which is what I just said. Yeah. You know what I mean? So to just break it down, the loser can get more ballots votes but less electoral votes. And I keep saying the same thing because I want you guys to actually get it, because it's kind of tricky. And you want to know what's funny, Crispy, about this whole thing? Now, the Electoral College was actually good back in the slavery times. You want to know why?
Why?
Because had they allowed just the popular vote, the South would have won every time. And as I was reading and learning up the other day, the landscape of slavery in the United States would have lasted much longer. It would have been quite different. But because of the Electoral College, the first 5 presidents was from the North. And that actually favored the ending of slavery. And then the South didn't have power, which they would have had the Electoral College would have never been implemented. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. So it was actually good back in the day, guys, but because it was created just because of slavery, when slavery was abolished, the Electoral College should have been abolished as well.
Correct.
Because in today's times, we're not counting slaves anymore. You know what I'm saying? And today's time, it needs to be based on most of the people that actually represent our country, period. You know what I'm trying to say? Which is the way they wanted it from the beginning. But because the South had slaves, they just created something to include them, but not give them an advantage. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so let me repeat that. Back in the day, the Electoral College was great when slavery was around because it actually helped the U.S. You know what I mean? In the long run, it actually helped us. When slavery was abolished, it should have been abolished because now people can win unfavorably when, you know, you may have a state like for instance, I think when Trump won, he won, but I think in some counties and states just by a few thousand votes.
Correct.
And he got those electoral votes his way.
Correct.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And it actually should be based on the most people in the United States that actually vote, which is how it was intended to be, but because of slavery, it wasn't. And that's the way it should be today. And I hear a lot of politicians talking about it. I was just watching something on CNN the other day, and I forgot who it was. One of the politicians was on there saying how the Electoral College needs to be abolished. It's bullshit, and it doesn't need to exist anymore. It's not needed because we don't have slavery anymore, and we're not counting a certain amount of people in certain states. You know what I'm trying to say? And another thing I think that's very important as well to understand is that, you know, most of the population that actually influence the rest of the nation to make those decisions, most of the population are in those states with the higher numbers. You know what I'm trying to say? So when you have all these tiny little counties that's winning with 100 people, and because you get I'm exaggerating. I know it's not 100 people, and you just get you rack up these Electoral College numbers. Those people really don't represent the rest of the nation.
Well, okay, so
and that's the problem.
Okay, so you know about the gerrymandering, right? Mm-hmm. Which all that little stuff that no one pays attention to, is what goes into almost electoral votes. So Republicans have been stacking or changing the game for years, and no one's really been stopping them, and that's causing the power to shift where you have small populations or small groups who think a particular way, and they can or they expand and cut out others so that you take on a smaller number of another group, but yet you're shifting the other. So like Republicans are taking in a little number of Democrats, but their numbers are still larger. Right. So then, therefore, when people do cast their votes, it's still going to run their way, and then they redesign another area, and which leads
just
to
so they could win that electoral vote.
Yes, it does. It does.
From those states, which is crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, this system just needs to be about. It needs to stop. It needs to end. It's not needed anymore. We need to vote off of the popular vote, just like a lot of other countries do. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not based on this, that, and third. It's just whoever comes out and vote the most.
Yes.
That's who wins.
Which is what we do for anything else statewide.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Statewide is always just about the numbers. But
that's what I'm
for some reason,
we know the reason. Because of slavery. Because of the slaves that existed. Yeah. It's not for some reason. We actually know the reason. But, that's something that needs to end, that needs to change, that needs to change quickly and swiftly, and it's messed up. And I hope that in 2020 Trump gets voted out, and I hope that whoever beats him,
seriously considers
all those little states that Hillary took for granted, that gave Trump that extra 33 electoral votes, that took his ass over the edge to win. And it was from, states and counties that, the population just wasn't, not huge, not states with really big populations at all. You know what I mean? But he was just smart, and they just went through there, and they went for his BS.
Yes, they did.
You know what I'm saying? They just went for his BS. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, I could go on and on, but that's pretty much what I would say.
That's pretty much it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, shoot, I guess that's it, guys. That was a quick topic.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much explained it. Like I said, unless there's something else you want to say, I don't have anything else that I want to add.
No, I agree. Like it, definitely Electoral College. It disenfranchises the voters over
Big time.
C's in the popular locations. So people who are states like California, New York, Illinois, Jersey, North Carolina, even you're not getting a true representation for the presidential vote out of it, because there's far more numbers in those states, but yet other really small states can carry more power.
Right, and you know what's funny? Here's the whole thing too. This was funny. So say in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Atlanta, and all that, right? Mm-hmm. You have, based on the Electoral College, you have, that flips red, mm-hmm. right? And okay, let's say the Electoral College didn't exist, mm-hmm. and you lost those states by 1,000 votes each. Mm-hmm. But California has so many more people.
It would wipe them out.
It'll wipe that out. And the person will still be the president.
Yeah. That the people voted.
That the people voted for. Majority, that most of the people voted for.
Yes.
Because everybody should count, guys. The way the Electoral College is set up, not everyone truly counts. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Because in Texas, New Mexico, all these states, if the Electoral College didn't exist, they would blow those people out in some of those other states. And to me, that actually matters.
Well, so that's why there is a positive part about the electoral states, is because you got a state like Wyoming mm-hmm. that's going to have a small population. Their population, they're let's say they're always a red. And it would almost for them feel like, why vote? Because California, with the numbers that people that are there. But the nice part about it is no matter what and no matter where you are, you're voting towards the president.
Right.
So even if you are in a red state and you vote blue, you can still vote blue, and it could even still switch.
You got to just get out there.
A person has to get out there, and not just vote, but the president has to get out there and actually be about the people.
Exactly.
And it's not just about a few. And that's where Trump actually kind of won, is that he went after few. And his base is just so loyal that they stick with him.
Right. But see, here's the thing though, Crispy. I don't necessarily feel bad for those people in those small states. You want to know why? Because if you're a Republican and you want to win, and say Wyoming has small numbers, work your ass off and get more Republicans to vote in the big states. Yeah. Like California, Texas, New Mexico, Chicago. I mean, it's still fair game.
Yeah.
But at least everybody's vote would matter. Mm-hmm. And it's not based on these electoral people that just represent that state based on numbers.
Correct.
That's bullshit.
Well, but
everybody's vote will count.
Yes.
Whereas now it kind of doesn't. Because all the people that voted for Hillary, mm-hmm. even though she had how much more, 3 million more votes or something than Trump?
Yes.
It was some weird number like that.
3 million.
She should be the president.
Correct. I don't disagree.
But because they brought slaves over here and they wanted the slaves to count but not have them vote, this system was created that still exists to this day. That's all outdated, doesn't need to exist, mm-hmm. and need to get the hell up out of here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to put it plainly, because it'll make everything fair if they got rid of the Electoral College. Right now, it's not fair.
Correct.
It's not.
It is and it isn't.
How can you say it is so it's not? It's not fair.
It's not.
It was always intended to be.
How many elections?
It was always intended to be.
How many elections?
Popular vote, but they switched it because of slaves.
See,
Well, James Madison said it. He said it should be the popular vote, but then he said, "But hold on,
wait,
because we got slaves."
Let's get this back. Let's make sure we got because if I'm correct, the founding fathers started the whole electoral to make sure that they had they didn't want to have a tyrant.
That's not why they created Electoral College.
I got this. The founding fathers did
Where
not trust.
Where did you get that from?
History Channel.
That's not a good source. No, you got to get your information from unbiased source. That's not why it was created. I mean, there's literally white politicians on TV recently saying how and why it was created, and they talk about slavery. That's the only reason why it was created, because of the slaves.
And I was about to you're disagreeing with me. You haven't even let me go through everything because the slaveries are in it. Slavery is in it.
Okay, cool. Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. Really, I think we got this. You got it reversed, and I'm just going to tell you why. So they founding fathers did not trust the electorate, which is the regular people, to be able to that they were going to be well informed enough to vote for a good person, a qualified member, person.
Okay.
And they also feared that someone could come in and get enough popular people to vote their way as a tyrant to just take over. So James Madison proposed the prototype for Electoral College, which counted slaves as 3/5 a person. The reason why they did it is, again, in the North there was more people. And just more people who could vote.
Because the slaves couldn't vote.
So if we take slaves out of the equation to vote, the North was winning that.
Right.
They added the number of slaves, but again, you could only count 3/5.
3 for every 5. Yeah.
So then, therefore, that boosted the numbers of the South, right? That gave them more numbers to be able to for the Electoral College.
Right.
So that gave them more Electoral College numbers because they are able to count slaves as votes. But yet slaves couldn't vote for anything.
Right.
So it's like, we'll go into slavery another time. So the point about it, this gave the slave states a disproportionate number of electoral votes. Okay, right. So it raised their number. The South had over 500,000 slaves at the time, and of course they could not vote. So basically, we are agreeing that in modern day, today, we don't need the Electoral College because people technically are smart enough to be able to vote for the right person. And so I'm agreeing with that. I just don't agree with where it started and everything. What
do you mean?
Just that it became because the South was able to get more numbers. And you're saying that it was just created so that the South got more numbers, but you were saying it was based to make it fair for the North, and it wasn't. It was the opposite. It was to make the South more powerful.
Hold on, say that again, because
if you go by numbers of people who can vote, so up north there was more people who could vote just because of you have to own land and all that other stuff, and slaves did not. So their populations were high up there, and there was just more people and they did count free slaves.
Right.
So down north or south they did not, or I'm not saying free slave, just free. They counted
free
everyone.
people, yeah.
In the South, if you were a slave, you weren't counted.
Right.
So therefore, they would just took their numbers, which had millions of slaves, and that gave them more power in the end.
It gave the North more power in the end.
South more power because of the fact that they were able to include their numbers, increase their numbers.
Hold on. Let me say this. Mm-hmm. The only reason why it gave first of all, the 3/5 compromise, if the North didn't agree to that, the South wouldn't have even been part of the United States. That was a part of the whole deal. The South said, if you guys don't let us count 3 out of 5 of our slaves, we're not even going to be a part of this union. They have a whole thing about that. Oh, from universities, everything, historians. Yeah, I swear to God. See, so the South said no. Okay. Right? The South said, if you say no to the 3/5 union, it'll be no United States.
No. I get
Right.
So
they wanted to count their slaves. Let me finish. I'll let you finish. Let me finish.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, they wanted to count their slaves.
Yes.
To be represented, but they didn't want their slaves to actually vote. And if the North didn't agree to that 3/5 compromise, they called it back then, those whole southern states, they would have created their own state. That was the only way the North even got them to be a part of the Union and became the United States.
I'm not disagreeing with you. We're talking about different things, though, because I'm still saying that 3/5 is not, yes, they agreed to it, but I'm not saying
right. And the South demanded
the South wanted the South wanted to count everybody, but then they said, "Oh, we're not going to let you count everybody. We're only going to let you do 3/5.
Three out of 5 people. We're going to let you count 3 out of 5 people."
Okay, it's the term. Right. It's 3/5.
Right. To make it a little more even. You know what I mean? Because without counting the slaves, just like you said prior, the North had way more people. But if you counted the slaves, the South had way more people. And I actually should have brought the break. So I had an actual graph.
My only point about it is that
if you counted just 3 out of 5, those numbers match the North a lot closer.
Yes.
You know what I'm trying to say? But the North was slick, and it's a good thing they were, because even though they did that and allowed it, they still ended up winning based on the Electoral College that James Madison said it needed to exist.
I agree with
that. The first 5 presidents came out of the North.
Okay.
And they were saying it's a good thing they created the Electoral College because of that, because they didn't, and it went on just a popular vote, and they let them count all the slaves, the South would be in total control.
But they couldn't do a popular vote.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, they decided not to.
No.
Right.
What I'm trying to tell you is there's no possible way they could have won in the South with a popular vote.
Right. Well, unless they counted all the slaves. I know that.
But okay, we both agree the slaves don't vote, right?
Right.
So it's irregardless of how many slaves they had, if they can't vote, so that's where the Electoral College helps the South. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It helped the South because they were able to say, I have this many people and we're all voting this way, but yet they're really not able to vote.
Right.
And so therefore again, the census numbers, the people who could vote still voted for someone that was down south, but they had electoral numbers that, like you just said, added up to make it fairly equal. So it was meant to just make it appeasing to. It was all based. It's a slavery thing, and it's dehumanizing to slaves as a more than just about these votes and stuff, because they could care less that Black people were, that they even had slaves. They just wanted to be able to. They definitely wanted to know that they had power and they had control, and they had the chance to keep it or give it up but it even things out, because yes, if the North had never agreed, they would have separated. I get that.
Right.
I agree with that. But
they would have separated.
The South basically just devalued human beings in order to be able to have power.
Right.
So that's more my point.
Right. No, I get we agree there. Yeah, but I'm just saying it wasn't created out of I want to call it what it is. It wasn't created, and you guys can do your own research. There's tons of research, but just use the correct source. The source of research is very important. I want to just call it what it is. It wasn't just based. Well, I think where we disagree, and disagreements are good, is it was created because they didn't want someone to come up, and have some tyranny and stuff. They didn't have shit to do with that. It was all James Madison. I actually could pull the speech up. One of the main historians from, I forgot what college he's from. He's wrote books about this.
No,
he actually pulled it. He actually has the speech where James Madison goes, "Wait a minute, but no, we can't do a popular vote because if they're counting all of their slaves, they're going to win every time." You know what I'm saying? But so keep in mind, he wasn't thinking that the South was like, no, we're not going to count all our slaves. He wasn't thinking that. He was thinking, if we do the popular vote and they are counting all their slaves, they would win every time. I could pull up the speech for you right now.
And James Madison is a slave owner, right?
Oh, I know that.
So he would not want to save the North, right?
Okay.
So
But he was he was there though in the North, in Philadelphia, wherever it happened, with all the other delegates.
He's still representing the southern states, right?
Well, I don't know what state he was from. I actually thought he was from the North.
He's a slave owner.
I know that, but Virginia was kind of in the North, and it was still a slave. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think he was in Virginia actually. That's not where he's from.
Kind of my point in saying it is, I get it was so the South had power. It's not so the North could have, or the North was. It was so the South had power, where the North could not vote. But at the same time, things were. That's where we differ.
Right.
I say that it's because he's a slave owner, so he is not looking out for the North. But
he literally said, "Nope, we can't do a popular vote. We got to create an electoral system so that we can, have a number of representatives representing those South states based on their number, but they can't count all their slaves. So that's when they said it's got to be 3 out of 5." So it was still trickery because the North kept winning anyway, which is what they wanted. It was still trickery, which is why I said earlier in the podcast that it was actually good back then, the Electoral College, because the South had that power and they were able to count all of their slaves, which is what they wanted to do, even though they didn't want to have them vote. The North was like, no, you get to count 3 out of the 5. They ain't voting anyway, is what I'm trying to say. See what I'm saying? Had the South been allowed what they wanted to do and count all their slaves, they had way more numbers, they would have won a popular vote every time.
And that's where we're agreeing, but I'm disagreeing with you. I'm saying I'm agreeing that the 3/5 was used because if it counted every single one, the South would have won every single election. But they didn't.
And they said slavery would have lasted longer.
Yeah.
All type of stuff would have happened, they said. They said it would have been crazy.
Country would be messed.
Yeah, exactly. Because they would have been winning every single election based on their ideals and ideologies and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I think
this is how our discussions go. He one way and he's projecting it, and I'm like, I think the only
point that we disagree on is why they created it.
Yes.
I'm saying it was strictly because of slavery, and you're saying it's because of some other stuff and slavery.
It's based on slavery, but it's
it's
also based on the fact that they didn't want the population to be able to vote for the president. They didn't think that the general population was smart enough.
But it had nothing to do with the North, once again. And we're going in circle, guys. We're going to end it. But it had nothing to do with the North, though, because the North didn't have slaves. They were, you know what I'm saying? I think we're saying the same thing, but in a different way.
But there was, to expand, there was still, people up in the North who thought slavery was okay.
Even though they didn't have any. They just, of course, some of them thought it was okay.
They would catch them and send them back down.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, guys, as you can see, it can get heated on these subjects, and it's always going to get heated. At the end of the day, the Electoral College needs to stop. It needs to end. It's a bunch of bullshit. It needs to be based on the popular vote. I don't care how many people you have in your state. If you don't have enough, you politicians just got to get out there and hit the pavement and win the popular vote. And I hope one day this outdated system that started in the 1700s finally stops.
And my point will be, get out and vote. Because if you don't vote, it doesn't. The popular thing will really matter even more. But getting out and vote and the Electoral College is out of it, then you know that your vote matters. And that's what I want you to do.
And also the census, too, to actually sum it up.
And complete the census, yes. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, because in looking this up,
hand in hand.
I started looking at the census a lot more seriously because I would always like F the census. I ain't filling that thing out. But now I see how important it is. But if they end the Electoral College, it won't matter anyway. You know what I'm saying? That's what they need to do. It's just end the
numbers are
college.
based on your population or your.
Yeah, I know.
So
I know.
It matters.
Yeah, but if they end the Electoral College, then it won't matter. They only use it to decide how many electors each state gets.
Correct. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So if they end the Electoral College, then the census won't matter anyway. Is what I'm saying. Unless they use it for other stuff.
They do use it for other stuff, for resources.
Oh, okay.
How much to give to whatever state for
Got you.
funding and stuff like that. Yeah.
Got you.
There's census is just important overall. So that's a whole different topic.
Got you. All right, guys. Well, that was our first episode of the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith. It's all good. I mean, to me, good podcasts, you're going to have disagreements. That's what I like about it. I mean, I've seen some of my peers like Joe Button and them go at it on podcasts, even on State of the Culture and all. They be arguing so you might see some fights with me and Chris. It's all good. But that, to me, that's what makes a great podcast. Like I said, it's the HBR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith. Tune in next time. We're kind of deciding how often we're going to bring it out and how we're going to release it. But this episode will probably come out tomorrow. I want to release this before the weekend. But anyway, tune in every week. And you guys actually could email us at rptalktruth@gmail.com. That's our same email from my other podcast, but it's race, politics. You know what I'm saying? Romantic politics. You know what I'm saying? You can email us there. We're going to check those emails and get those answers and stuff. Anyway.
And if one of us got it wrong, you could tell us.
Tell us, yeah. Follow us on social media.
Yep.
You'll see all that stuff in the description. And I hope this kind of explained the Electoral College to you guys, and we were clear, even though we were going in circles sometimes too. All right, peace out.
All right, peace.